Welcome to a Legendary special about the London Plague of 1603. Our story begins on March 24th, 1603, when Queen Elizabeth I of England died after reigning for 45 years. She left James I of Scotland as her heir. James' journey to England did not begin until April, in part because James I wished to avoid the funeral of Elizabeth, the woman who executed his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots. For those inclined to see omens, one could find many evil signs in James' journey to London. At Newark-on-Trent, he learned of a cut-purse preying upon his retinue. Ignorant of English common law or the right to trial by jury, and accustomed to the rough justice of Scotland, he simply ordered the thief to be hung. At Burley by Stanford, he tumbled from his horse and broke his collarbone, which slowed his journey quite a bit more. For 4 days he rested at Robert Cecil's country estate, where he took pleasure in creating many knights to please his new English subjects. During Elizabeth's whole reign, she created 878 knights, while in 4 months James I knighted 909 men. Many grumbled that being addressed as Sir came to mean very little. Popular stories claimed that he once knighted a piece of beef with the words, "Arise, sirloin." Another tale told of him failing to note the name of the man he just knighted, and he said, "Rise up and call thyself Sir what thou wilt." By May 7th, James rode towards London, and the Lord Mayor greeted him 4 miles outside the city, in part because conditions within London had become unsafe. James I spent the night at the Charterhouse, then made his way to the Tower of London, where he spent a few more days. While in the royal apartments, he began a tour of his new capital, dazzled by the wealth of London compared to Edinburgh. He later declared the first 3 years of his reign to be as a Christmas. Nonetheless, one final omen of trouble held a silent and deadly court in the narrow streets and dark alleys of early modern London. One of James' first orders as King of England involved issuing a book of orders relating to the plague. It outlined rules and procedures to be followed, aimed at stopping the spread of the bubonic plague. The first half of the text outlined orders aimed at controlling the spread of the plague. If one of the family members in a house fell ill, then houses must be closed up for 6 weeks. Should any family member leave the house, they must mark their clothes to warn others of their exposure to the terrible plague. These marked persons must also be overseen by watchmen and allow their clothes or other possessions to be burned if the watch judges that necessary. In a small mercy, James I ordered collections to finance the purchase of new goods for the infected. Yet breaking these orders could be punished by a spell in the stocks. While comical today, few in the 17th century saw the stocks as something to laugh at. People could spend a few hours or a few days with their necks and hands locked in the stocks. They went without food and water and could not use the restroom, so they simply urinated in their trousers and perhaps defecated there as well. All the while, angry residents gathered around to pelt them with rotten vegetables and animal or human feces gathered from the open trenches in the dirt streets. The second half of James' book gives us a horrifying glimpse into the world of 17th century medicine. Again, James I published the document hoping to show compassion to his poor subjects by showing them how they too could guard themselves against the plague. Little did the Scholar King know that he simply published what could be called, at best, professionalized quackery. Back then, doctors believed that health rested on the 4 humors, liquids within the body, namely blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These connected to the 4 seasons of the year: yellow bile with summer, black bile with autumn, phlegm with winter, and blood with spring. To keep the humors in balance, physicians often bled patients. They then threw blood out the windows into the dirt streets, making the roads where barber surgeons plied their bloody trade smell like slaughterhouses. James' medical book included a host of strange medicines, advising pregnant women to eat toast covered with vinegar, butter, and cinnamon to guard against the plague. Since the poor could not afford such things, he advised that bread and butter could make an affordable substitute. Those already suffering from sores could ease them by pressing a warmed mixture of onions, butter, and garlic against them. The very poorest could simply place a heated piece of bread fresh from the stove upon their sore. Although these cures seem bizarre to us, people believed in them and would try anything to protect themselves from this terrible disease. Even when out and about, people held herbs in their hands, the same they burned to cleanse their homes. They included rosemary, juniper, bay leaves, frankincense, sage, and lavender, which smelled delicious but didn't necessarily guard against disease. Others breathed through a handkerchief dipped in vinegar, perhaps an early alternative to medical face masks. Thomas Dekker described the depressing sight of London streets strewn with worthless dead herbs, lying alongside the sick and dying. Dekker wrote, "Where all the pavement should instead be of green rushes, be strewed with blasted rosemary, withered hyacinths, fatal cypresses, and yew, thickly mingled with heaps of dead men's bones." William Shakespeare's acting company, formerly called the Queen's Men, had since become the King's Men, yet they could not put on performances. Further orders shut down theaters within London, so Shakespeare spent his time writing the play Measure for Measure. The play is set in an unruly Vienna stricken by plague, perhaps inspired by what Shakespeare saw in London. Despite the efforts of physicians and the authorities, the plague claimed the lives of 30,000 Londoners, at least 1 in 5 of its residents. James I of England himself did not have a lavish coronation like his Tudor predecessors because he feared exposing more people to the plague. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.